On the 27th of May, NASA and SpaceX will launch humans from American soil for the first time since 2011. But what's the history of NASA? Coming up in this first episode on What's Up. Formerly the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, or NACA, NASA was established by President Eisenhower in 1958 after the Soviet Union, that it was then, launched the first satellite Sputnik to orbit the Earth. Whilst the satellite was very primitive in its working, this sent the USA into panic in an ever-frosting battle that was the Cold War. With both nations fighting for superiority, the USA started their own project to reach for the stars, and so the space race started. NASA's first high-profile program was Project Mercury, an effort to see if humans could survive in space. This saw astronaut Alan Shepard become the first American in space in 1961. It conducted 20 uncrewed developmental flights, some using animals, and 6 successful flights by astronauts. The astronauts were collectively known as the Mercury 7, and each spacecraft was given a name ending with a 7 by its pilot. Later followed Project Gemini, which used spacecraft built for 2 astronauts to perfect the capabilities needed for the national objective of landing a man on the moon by the end of the 1960s. Their launch vehicle was a Gemini Titan II, a modified intercontinental ballistic missile, or ICBM. It performed missions long enough for a trip to the moon and back, perfected working outside the spacecraft with extravehicular activity, and pioneered the orbital maneuvers necessary to achieve space rendezvous and docking. Gemini was the first program to use the newly built Mission Control Center at the Houston Manned Spacecraft Center for Flight Control. And with these new techniques proven by Gemini, Apollo could pursue its prime mission without doing these fundamental exploratory operations. Project Apollo achieved that objective in July 1969, with the Apollo 11 mission and Neil Armstrong becoming the first man on the moon.
The surface appears to be very fine-grained as you get close to it. It's almost like a powder. Ground mass is very fine. I'm going to step off the limb. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
With an estimated 600 million watching the moon landing, it became one of the biggest live viewed events in human history. NASA expanded on it with 5 more landings, and Apollo 17 being the last and final one in 1972, bringing to an end the Apollo program and totaling 12 men to walk on the moon. Apollo set several major human spaceflight milestones, and it stands alone in sending crewed missions beyond low Earth orbit. Apollo 8 was the first crewed spacecraft to orbit another celestial body, and Apollo 11 was the first crewed spacecraft to land on one. Overall, the Apollo program returned 842 pounds of lunar rocks and soil to Earth, greatly contributing to the understanding of the moon's composition and geological history. On the 14th of May 1973, Skylab was launched using a modified Saturn V. Skylab was America's first experimental space station, designed for long-duration missions, and its program objectives were twofold: to prove that humans could live and work in space for extended periods, and to expand our knowledge of the solar astronomy well beyond Earth-based observations. Successful in all respects despite early mechanical difficulties, 3 three-man crewed occupied the Skylab workshop for a total of 171 days and 13 hours, and it was the site of nearly 300 technical experiments. In July 1975, the United States and Soviet Union came together for the Apollo-Soyuz test project. This was to be the first international space mission. The Apollo and Soyuz flights launched within 7.5 hours of each other on the 15th of July and docked on the 17th of July. Millions of people viewed from around the world as they watched on television a US Apollo module docked with a Soviet capsule. The project and its memorable handshake was a symbol of ease between the two superpowers and is genuinely considered to mark the end of the space race. The Apollo program ends, and 4 years later in 1979, the Space Shuttle program starts. This was the 4th human spaceflight program carried out by NASA, and the first fully functional orbiter, Columbia, was delivered to Kennedy Space Center on the 25th of March 1979. On the 12th of April 1981, which was also the 20th anniversary of Yuri Gagarin's spaceflight, it launched with a crew of 2, Mission Commander John Young and pilot Robert Crippen. 6 space shuttles were built: Challenger, Enterprise, Columbia, Discovery, Atlantis and Endeavour. However, Enterprise was built to perform atmospheric test flights after being launched from a modified Boeing 747, and it was constructed without engines or functional heat shield. As a result, it was not capable of space flight. In total, there were 135 shuttle missions, where they went on to launch the Hubble Space Telescope in 1990, partner up with Russia for the Mir program between 1995 and 1998, and then worked to deliver and build the International Space Station from 1998. The Space Shuttle program came to an end in 2011, with Atlantis touching down on the 21st of July, closing the chapter in the shuttle's involvement of space. In 2017, the Artemis program started and is an ongoing crewed spaceflight program carried out predominantly by NASA, US commercial spaceflight companies, as well as other international partners, with the goal of landing the next man and the first woman on the moon, specifically at the lunar South Pole region by 2024. NASA sees Artemis as the next step towards the long-term goal of establishing a sustainable presence on the moon, laying the foundation for private companies to build a lunar economy and eventually sending humans to Mars. The Orion MP-CV is a class of partially reusable space capsule planned to be used by NASA's human spaceflight programs. The spacecraft consists of a crew module, manufactured by Lockheed Martin, and the European Service Module, manufactured by Airbus Defence and Space. Capable of supporting a crew of 6 beyond low Earth orbit, Orion can last 21 days undocked and up to 6 months docked. It will be launched using the Space Launch System, or SLS, which is a super heavy lift expendable launch vehicle and has been under development since its announcement in 2011. So this brings us to the current day, and that humans will once again launch from American soil through the partnership of NASA and SpaceX. NASA astronaut Robert Behnken and Douglas Hurley will fly to the International Space Station on board the SpaceX Crew Dragon using a Falcon 9 rocket. NASA's aim is to create a safe, reliable and cost-effective access to and from the space station, as well as other destinations in low Earth orbit. Behnken and Hurley are both veterans of 2 space shuttle programs, with Behnken serving on mission specialist on STS-123 and 130, and Hurley on STS-127 and 135, which was the final flight of the space shuttle program and the last time humans launched from American soil. It brings a symbolic nature that Hurley will now become one of the ones to return this back to the US on the 27th of May 2020. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed it, don't forget to show your appreciation by giving this video a like. If you have any comments or maybe a suggestion for future video, stick it down below in the comments section. But most importantly, if you want to keep up to date with future videos, then hit that subscribe button and you'll be notified when they come out. I've been Tom Owen and you've been watching What's Up.